Grade 10, this lesson is for you. This is chapter 6, section 4, and probably we're going to be doing section 5 too. This is about some of the terms used for genetics, and we're going to understand the meaning of each of these terms. We will start by the first one, which is the gene. The gene is a piece of DNA that provides a set of instructions to a cell to make a certain protein. Whatever trait we're talking about, it is transmitted or it's apparent because of a gene. So as we said before, the color of your hair, the color of your eyes, the color of your skin, your height, your cholesterol levels, your blood sugar levels, all these are expressed due to the presence of genes, and genes are formed of DNA. Okay, an allele. An allele is any of the alternative forms of a gene that may occur at a specific locus. An allele is the representation of the gene coming from each parent. Each one of your genes, as we said before, is represented by two alleles, one present from each of your parents. Then we have, as we talk about the allele, we have to talk about the dominant and the recessive. The dominant allele is the allele that is expressed in two, it's always expressed, okay? So it's either only one, and in this case it's going to be covering the recessive one, or they are two dominant. The recessive allele is the one that's only expressed when two copies are present. Let's talk about that. So the dominant allele is always expressed. Wherever it is going to be expressed. One of the most famous dominant alleles is the dark skin. So if a dark-skinned person is marrying a clear-skinned person, most probably the kids are going to be dark-skinned. Why? Because this dark skin color is dominant. So the white skin color is recessive. We said recede means go back. So it's recessive means that it always goes back if it is crossed with a dominant allele. For a recessive allele to show, it has to be presented twice. It has to be pure and presented by both parents. Okay, so the two alleles may be the same, and in this case we say that they are homozygous. But if they are not the same, we say that they are heterozygous. So homozygous means that we're talking about the presentation of the allele as the same. It has the two identical alleles, that the organism has two identical alleles. Or heterozygous means that they are different. So again, dominant, it's always expressed. Recessive, it always recedes, but it's expressed if it is pure. Homozygous means that both of the alleles are similar. For example, I'm inheriting a straight hair texture. If I have straight hair texture allele presented from my father and my mother, this means that this straight hair is homozygous. Okay, if I have a straight hair texture presented from my father and a curly hair texture presented from my mother, in this case it's heterozygous. Okay, and then we're going to talk about the phenotype. The phenotype is related to the physical appearance. So the phenotype is the physical appearance of the individual. But usually, as we just said, the physical appearance is different from the genetic composition. As I said, if I have straight hair, I might have had straight hair genes from one of my parents and curly hair genes from the other parent. But what do you see? What you see is the straight hair. This is the phenotype. But if I want to know how did I inherit it, how my genes are formed, this is going to be called the genotype. So the phenotype is the physical appearance. This is what you get to see when you look at a person, or you look at a plant, or you look at an animal. But the genotype means what their genes are formed of. And Then we're going to talk about how we're going to represent all of this. Here is it. The genotype is the genetic makeup, and the phenotype is the physical appearance. And then whenever we try to represent some of the genes, we use what we call a Punnett square. The Punnett square is a grid system for predicting all the possible genotypes resulting from a cross. The axes of the grid represent the possible gamete genotypes of each parent. The grid boxes show all the possible genotypes of the offsprings from those two parents. Okay, so what do we do at the end? At the end, we're going to count the number. So here is the Punnett square, and we have here one of the traits. Okay, and we have here another trait. Here, these are the alleles coming from one parent. We represent one parent on one side of the grid, and then we present the other parent on the other side of the grid. These are the alleles coming from each parent. And then we see the results of the cross. So this is one of the alleles, and this is the other one, and we get it here. And then this is one of the alleles, and this is the other one, and we get it here, and so on. So to represent the mating of two individuals and to show the inheritance of a certain gene, we use the Punnett square. And then we count at the end. If you look here, we have here always the dominant trait is represented by a capital letter, and of course the recessive trait is the recessive allele is represented by a small letter. So here, when we look, every time you see the dominant letter, this means that the dominant gene will be apparent. So if we think, for example, here we're talking about brown hair color. If this is the dominant allele, every time you see the dominant allele, this means that you're going to see brown hair color. And if we look at this and we say, for example, that the blonde hair color is recessive, so this means these parents that both have blonde hair color, if we represent their offsprings, we're going to have 75% of the offsprings with brown hair color, and the recessive allele will only be expressed once here where we find the blonde hair color. So we represent the dominant trait with a capital letter, we represent the recessive trait, the recessive allele, with a small letter, and then we read and count. It's as simple as that. Here, in order to represent the Punnett square, we have what we call the monohybrid cross. In the monohybrid cross, it examines the inheritance of only one specific trait. So we talk, for example, about the color of a plant, the color of a flower plant. We talk about the texture of a leaf. We talk about the color of hair, a color of eye. One trait, and we discuss how it's inherited from both parents. Okay, so this is what we call a monohybrid cross. Okay, in this monohybrid cross, you can see homozygous. Homozygous means that we are talking about a pure trait inherited from both parents. If you look here, this is not a pure trait. Why isn't it pure? Because it's represented by one dominant and one recessive allele. This is here, if you look at this is pure. Why? Because it's represented by two similar alleles. This is also pure or homozygous. This is heterozygous, which means that it's represented by one dominant and one recessive. Okay, so homozygous means that the allele is equally represented by both parents, and in this case we're going to have the same letter representing it, the same size letter, so either two capital or two small letter. If it's heterozygous, it's going to be represented by one small and one capital letter. This is all for today. Next time we're going to talk about the dihybrid cross.